Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning, Fabian. Okay, a reminder that paper is due tonight. Also, there's still some confusion out there. This is a 4 to 5 page paper. Okay. Ooh, money. 4 to 5 page. Oh, sorry, typo. That just gives information on both sides of a controversy. It does not take a position. Okay, this is the paper you're turning in tonight. 4 to 5 pages. Says this is what one side believes, this is what the other side believes. Does not take a position. Okay, so there was still some confusion about whether or not this paper in the final draft takes a position. It does not. Okay, the next paper will take a position. That will be an 8 to 10 page paper. And persuasive paper. So is everybody clear? Any questions about that?
So the next paper is 8 to 10 pages, but this paper is 45 pages. All right, got it.
Yes, the next paper, you can take some of the information or all of it that you've gathered for this paper and use it to argue your position. So this paper was basically the foundation or the research that lets you get familiar with the issue. Okay. Now that you've read both sides, you've seen some evidence, you're going to dig a little deeper, right? And you're going to answer your research question. Is online education just as good, better, worse than brick and mortar education?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Honora.
Oh, no, ma'am. I just had to ask you that.
You're good? Okay. Sometimes your spaces light up and I'm not sure if you have a question. So that's the paper for tonight. This paper was about getting really familiar with the issue and seeing what both sides are saying. Okay. You're still going to be able to use the majority of your sources, but now you're going to use it to persuade us to your position and to address the opposition to your position, which we're going to all talk about that coming up. Okay, Janie, I can help you with that after class. Or you can use the template. There's an MLA template that you download and then you just replace all your information with the template information. Let me find it real quick. There's also a link to it on Brightspace. Are you using Word or something else? Oh, you are using Google Docs. Okay, that you might have to Google how to put in a header on Google Docs because I am not familiar with that. Either that or there is a free version of Word that is available to everybody on your My Apps page under the Office, Microsoft Office, right? So if you go to Lindenwood, or excuse me, wrong college. If you go to McKendree's page in the My Apps, this has free versions that you can download of Excel, PowerPoint, Word. Okay, as long as you're a student, you have access to these for free. If you want to keep using Google Docs, you'll have to do some more investigating. Because all I would do if I helped you would be to Google it. Okay, good question. Anybody else? Okay, so the paper's due by midnight. It is just explaining both sides. This paper just explains both sides. It does not take a position. This paper was to get familiar with the issue, learn about the issue. The next paper will take a position, 4 to 5 pages. It's all written on the assignment on Brightspace. The assignment does not change between the first and the final draft. It's the same assignment for the paper. Okay. I found a great chart that I'm going to share with you guys that can help with in-text citations, because I saw some people went ahead and tried out the in-text citations, but it looked like everybody was kind of hesitant with them. So here's a great chart I found. One second. And I will share this under announcements on Brightspace as well. So in this handy dandy chart here, this is for MLA, okay? So if you have one work by an author, like you're citing an article, a newspaper article, a magazine article, it gives you examples. This is what your citation in the text would look like, why it states that. And then if there's a page number, you put it at the end, right? Okay. The first time you're going to give us their entire name and maybe some of their qualifications. That's another thing I asked a lot of people for in the drafts, is you told me a person's name, but you didn't say if they were a researcher, a reporter, a journalist. Do you have a question? Okay. One work by 2 authors. Okay, same thing here. There'll be a period after the closing parentheses. Groups as authors, according to the University of Pittsburgh website, according to, you know, we'll go with Mad Mothers Against Drunk Driving. If you have 2 or more works by the same author, it gets trickier. You usually don't run into that as much, but you might if you're looking at experts. Okay. So it's just a nice handy dandy little chart. Just don't forget the period after the closing parentheses. This is what it looks like if you don't mention the author's name, right? Any questions about this chart? If there is no page number and you've already mentioned the author's name, then there's not going to be anything at the end in parentheses, right? But it's a nice little chart if you're like, okay, I have 1 work by 1 author, I have 1 work by 2 authors. I have work by, you know, a website or a group of authors or a university or a hospital or a research institution. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Lizzie. So here's the link to it. But like I said, you can copy it now, or I'll put it up there on Brightspace under the announcements. Welcome back, Reagan. Okay, the other thing I want to review is academic writing style. We talked about all the rules, and now that you have your shitty first draft done and you're revising it, and you're going to finish editing it. Okay, so I have a nice video where she sums up the rules. So let's take a look and review some of those things that we talked about.
And in today's lesson, I'll explain 12 common errors that students make in academic English. Now, what's academic English? It's the English that you need to use in school, college, or university when you're reading, writing, listening, and speaking, okay, ideally, but most importantly, when you're writing. Now, what's the difference between academic English and general English? Well, academic English in general, there are many differences, but in general, academic English is more formal, it's more objective, and also it has to use a lot of referencing. You always have to let people know where you got your information from. You have to cite the source, you have to give the source. You can't claim to write something and claim it as your own, okay? If you do that, that's called plagiarism. It's a serious offense in academic circles. But today, we're not going to talk about how to reference a source. We're going to talk about the two other aspects, how to write more formally and objectively. And what are the 10 common errors that students make when they are not formal enough? Okay, sorry, not 10, 12. Okay, here we go. So first of all, using contractions. All of these are what you should not do. Okay, so avoid using contractions. Or sorry, in this case, don't use contractions at all. So don't say don't, say do not. Don't say isn't, say is not. All right, that's academic English. Next, avoid phrasal verbs. So for example, instead of saying go up, prices went up, say prices increased. Instead of saying take away, say remove. Avoid these multi-part verbs, right? It's not as formal. Next, avoid idioms. Instead of saying it was A1, say it was excellent. Okay? Avoid slang. Don't say kids, say children. Use the proper terminology for various subjects. Avoid pronouns. So for example, instead of saying you can see from the graph, right? We use the pronoun you. Instead of that, say the graph shows, right? Next, avoid negatives. For example, instead of saying something is not effective, just say it is ineffective. Instead of saying something is not positive, say it's negative. So avoid these kind of negatives. Next, avoid cliches. Now, what are cliches? Cliches are a kind of idiom, basically, commonly used expressions, all right? And so on, kind of a common wisdom about different things. And so you want to avoid these kind of expressions. For example, instead of saying, when all is said and done, right? We use that in conversation, but you don't want to use it in your academic writing. Instead of saying that, you'd probably use an expression like in conclusion. Right? So next, there's certain kinds of punctuation. There's actually lots of rules about punctuation. And the kind of punctuation, the style of punctuation that you use in academic writing depends on the style guide that you have been asked to follow in your school, college, or university. some very well-known style guides like MLA or APA. These are some style guides, and they tell you everything about how you need to write, what rules you need to follow, what the rules of punctuation, of quotation marks, of this and that, okay? A lot more than what I'm covering here. But in general, I can just tell you that we don't see that many exclamation marks in academic writing, okay? We do see a lot of semicolons, all right? That's kind of, when do we use a semicolon? Do you remember? Okay, what's the difference between a period and a semicolon? A period clearly divides two sentences, and a semicolon has one sentence, which is a complete sentence. Then you put the semicolon, do not capitalize the next letter, and the next sentence is connected, and you want to show that it's connected to the first sentence, which is a very academic, intellectual, philosophical thing to do. So learn to use semicolons if you're in university especially. Next, avoid vague language. Don't say a bit, a lot, kind of, sort of. The days for using that kind of language is over once you, the days are over once you've reached university, right? So instead of that, say a considerable number, a considerable amount. Okay, that's why sometimes they say that you can tell when someone has been to university because they use higher level language. Which doesn't mean that you cannot use higher level language if you have not been to university. You can still learn to use excellent language. Next, simple vocabulary. Don't use simple vocabulary. You want to use slightly more sophisticated vocabulary. Instead of saying a big difference, say a major distinction. Okay? Now, this is academic. Next, avoid giving your personal opinion. Okay? In academic circles, they're not so keen on knowing your opinion. Don't say I think, I believe, in my view. Instead of that, say according to so and so, or according to this research study, and you mention particular research study. You have to always give credit to the source. Where did you get your information? Who wrote that book? What happened? Okay, you have this various styles and ways in which you can mention that information, but you must always give credit to the source and don't believe it unless it's specifically asked for in a particular assignment. Okay, and last, don't use language which is too direct or too strong, because then maybe it cannot be justified. So you can't make very broad claims about anything. You have to be able to justify anything that you write, especially. Okay? So in other words, in English, your goal is to speak like your professor and write like your textbook. And if you can do that, then you're probably going to do very well in the academic world and also out in your career. Okay? If you'd like to do a quiz on this, please go to our website, www.
Okay. If you had trouble with the video, I will be posting this later on Brightspace. Also, I'll post all of the videos I'm going to show today. Also, you know, our classes are always recorded. If something doesn't come through or you get kicked out and you need to go look at something, you can go to YouTube to our class channel and look at the class recording. So does everybody remember? Usually people remember no contractions, no personal pronouns. Now, when she said don't use your personal opinion, that's true the majority of the time. Sometimes your instructor will give you permission to use your personal opinion. I'm asking you to use your opinion of the controversy for the next paper, but based on research. It can't be just based on the things that have happened to you in your life. It has to be only based on credible, provable research. Okay, but you still don't have to say I to tell me what your opinion is. Now, if it helps you in the draft, go for it. Say, I think, I believe, and then just take out that first part when you go back and edit. Okay, so before you turn in your final paper today, if you haven't already done so, you need to make sure that you're using academic style like we talked about last week, so you don't lose points. All right. And this is the style that you want to use for all your classes. Upgrade your language, avoid simple vocabulary. Now, it doesn't mean you have to use big, complicated words. It just means you have to use the best words that you know. Okay. Any questions about academic style? You want to get a good handle on these rules because you'll be using them for all of the papers that you're writing in this class from here on out in other classes.
So you can use stuff like you, right?
No, you don't want to use I,
Okay.
you, or we. They are verboten, forbidden for academic writing. So like when
But
she
the
had the example in there and said, you can see the graph shows, she just said, you know, the graph shows.
but they're fine for like a first draft, right?
Oh yeah, for the first draft, they're fine. I'm not gonna pick on academic style in your first draft. You only want to go ahead and do it, you know, because otherwise you can kind of impede your writing flow by worrying too much about the rules in the first draft. You want to worry about it when you're editing for the final. Okay, so cite your sources from this last paper correctly. Show me that you know how to use the MLA style that you guys covered in the presentation. Use academic style to present your ideas and to present both sides. Okay. Don't take a position. Just say this is what one side thinks of the controversy and this is what the other side thinks on the controversy. All right. The next thing I want to go over since we are going to start talking about arguing, persuading people, right? Well, oh wait, one more video I want to show that's just a little bit of review to make sure that you're okay with the paraphrasing. So this is an example, and we practiced it a lot, but still, she's got some great examples in here. So let's just review what these are, because I will be asking you to define these. This is a good review video for when we are heading into the final exam, because I'll be asking you what are summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. I'll ask you to define them and explain how they're used for academic writing. Okay. Let me share this with you.
Summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. A guide to doing it right. Let's start off by talking about summarizing. Summarizing takes something and boils it down to its essence. So something larger to something smaller. Let's take a look at an example. Here's some text that you may be familiar with. If I was going to summarize this, I would take a look at that text and see what stands out for me. It opens with a really great quote. I can't replace that. I can't do better than, so I'm going to include that quote in my summary. After that, let's look at the first paragraph. What's important in that first paragraph? Well, there are a couple of things that stand out. First off, I see that I have two sides, the rebels and the evil galactic empire. I see that they're having a civil war and that the rebels have just won their first victory. Those are the important key points there. In the second paragraph, I see again, the rebels stole some secret plans to the Death Star. That's important and good to know. Lastly, I see that Princess Leia is being pursued and she has the stolen plans. There's a lot more there, But these are unnecessary details if I'm trying to just come up with a summary. So an acceptable summary might look like this. What makes this acceptable? Well, it starts with some citation information. This is not MLA, APA, or Chicago style, but at the very least, it's saying, where is this coming from? The movie Star Wars. After that, my exact quote, my great quote, I used it and I put it in quotation marks to say, this isn't me, I'm borrowing this from the movie. After that, I see a lot of the key points that we saw in that original text. We knew there was a civil war between the rebels and the Galactic Empire. We knew the rebels had stolen the plans to the Death Star and that the Empire was trying to get them back. So you can see I took that larger block of text and tried to really boil it down into its essence. Let's take a look at a not so good example. What makes this unacceptable? It still starts with that citation information, which is good. But then what happens after that? Well, there's that great quote, but you'll notice there are no quotation marks here. So I'm saying I wrote that. That's my language. Those are my words. And I didn't take that from anywhere. That's what you're doing when you don't have quotation marks around other people's words. And what about the rest of my wording? Well, I borrowed things and I just changed them a little bit. So the original text from the movie was Evil Galactic Empire. What have I got? Oh, I didn't even bother changing that, right? The Evil Galactic Empire. Again, it's not in quotes, and I just used it exactly the way it was. Rebel spies managed to steal secret plans. Well, what did I use? I used rebel spies were able to steal the secret plans. Those are pretty similar. Princess Leia races home aboard her starship. And I put, Princess Leia is speeding home on her starship. They sound the same. They look the same. If your text has the feel of the original, then I'm not summarizing. I'm just taking chunks of it and putting it together. Copying and pasting and changing a few words is not a summary. Let's talk about paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is almost like a translation. It's taking something written in a particular style using particular language and translating it into what sounds like you, what would come out of your mouth. So for instance, let's say I start with a sentence like this. Well, that sounds scientific. It sounds pretty fancy. I'm going to read this and really get a feel for it. And now I can translate it into what I would say. Are all of the important points still there? Let's take a look. So they said the authors studied the effects. And I said, this study looked at a little simpler. What did they look at? They looked at sub-zero temperatures. And I say, very cold, right? Doesn't have to be so specific. The mortality. Well, mortality is another way of saying surviving or not surviving, right? Your ability to live or not live. And they went scientific. They went with Rattus norvegicus. Well, I'm just going to make it simple, rats. So I've got the same basic components. I made them a little more understandable to be comfortable with the original text. Let's do it again. So here is our original block of text, a little more scientific. Not bad, but still, it's not me. It's not how I would write or speak. So I'm going to take that and translate it into myself. Here's what I would say. Let's take a look again and see if we can find the various bits and pieces. Researchers found. I'm going to go with the study looked at. Researchers found is not nearly as intimidating perhaps as the authors studied the effects, but it's not how I would speak. Equally strong association. Well, I'm going to call that a similarity, right? Things are equally strong, well, then they're similar. And I'm going to say that there was a similarity between these things. They say the pleasurable effects of eating Oreos, and I just say the highs produced by sugary junk food. Cocaine or morphine, I don't need to be that specific. I can just say specific drugs. There's my rats. So I'm still looking at the drugs and the sugary junk food on rats. And specifically about a particular environment where the rats wanted to be. They found that the drugs and the Oreos made them both want to be there. So they wanted to be where those things were. Didn't matter if it was drugs, didn't matter if it was junk food, the rats liked them both. You've got to take the original in its actual intent, and you've got to translate it into something that sounds more like you. Let's see something that's a little easier than those two blocks of text. You might be familiar with this movie. If you recognize that phrase, you know that it's something that gets repeated quite a bit. What if I wanted to paraphrase that phrase? I might say that he introduces himself. He informs his foe of the reason why he is angry, and he then immediately issues a threat to him. The essential parts: his name, why he's angry, and what he's going to do next. There they are, only said in a different way. Let's go back to our Star Wars. I have that first paragraph, and now I have my paraphrase of it. Are the important points still there? Let's see. Yep, there's Civil War. There is a Civil War. Mention that. They said rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory. And I say rebels are using guerrilla tactics resulting in a recent success. Same basic idea. I did like that phrase though, the evil galactic empire. So I took it and I put it inside quotes. Remember, if you can't do better than them, use their words, put them in quotes. Second paragraph. Well, the rebel spies managed to steal secret plans. Rebels have just stolen the plans. Though there's a weapon with enough power to destroy an entire planet, and I'm going to just call that a cataclysmic weapon. So I said in a shorter sentence, a lot of what they said. I didn't feel that the Death Star, the fact that it was an almond space station, was absolutely essential there. Good enough. That last paragraph, let's take a look at what we've got there. Pursued by the Empire. Well, the Empire is giving chase, sure, to our main character there, Princess Leia, or one of them, and plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy. She hopes to use the plans to win the fight against the Empire. I was a little less dramatic. You can see the important points, and a phrase is kept in quotes. How about an unacceptable paraphrase? Well, let's start with that first paragraph again. What have I done here? Well, there are some exact phrases without quotation marks again. They're striking from a hidden base. They're striking from a hidden base. There's my against the evil galactic empire, and there it is again. If their words are great, that's fine, but quotation marks. Let's take a look at the rest of this thing. What's wrong with the rest of it? Or what's wrong? What else is wrong with it? How many very slightly reworded sentences do I have still sound and feel like the originals? Oh, a lot. Wait till you see. Have won their first victory, had a recent victory. It's close. During the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon. During the recent fight, rebel spies were able to steal the plans to the Empire's supreme weapon. You know, ultimate, supreme, there's not a lot of difference there. The Death Star we see is an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. And I said that the Death Star is a space station strong enough to vaporize a whole planet. Yeah, close enough. Sounds the same. Custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy sounds a whole lot like because she has the stolen plans that can save the rebels and bring peace to the universe. Just leaving off the ... on the end, not enough. There is, believe it or not, some actual paraphrasing going on in here. Up at the top, I had, it is a period of civil war, and I took that and turned it into the rebels and the Galactic Empire are engaged in a civil war. Pursued by the Empire's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship. Princess Leia is being chased by the evil members of the Empire as she heads to her home world. It needs to be more than it sounds the same and you just substituted one or two words here and there. Not good enough. So when should you use quotes? Ask yourself, can you say it better? In this movie, there are a couple of really great lines. And I don't think that once upon a time in a faraway place in space can do better than a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. May the force be with you is a beautifully put statement. I hope that the spiritual energy of the universe is on your side. It's a little funky. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's classic. There is no worse place filled with such terrible people in existence. That is not classic. Think about it, hear it in your head. Can you do better? Is it a great line? Does it really sum up what you want to say? Could you do it better? If not, use it, put it in quotes. However, use quotes sparingly. Not every sentence is a gem. Find the best, use those. How do you summarize? You always start, no matter what you're doing, by reading the text. Jot down a few key words and ideas. What stands out? Remember, stand back, take a look at it as a whole. Now put it away. Don't have it sitting there while you're working on it. What's important is what will filter up in your memory. What do you remember? That's what stood out. State that main idea in your own words. Remember, this is supposed to sound like you. Don't put your opinion into the summary. A summary is just a statement of the facts. Don't also put your interpretations. That comes later. Okay? If you're just summarizing a source, be it a web page, a book, a movie, be plain about what you're summarizing and then talk about it after. Then go back, check your summary against the original. Make sure you didn't go with any of those exact phrases, and if you did, put them in quotes if they were worth keeping. If you used exact phrases and didn't mean to, get rid of it. Take another stab at it. Maybe you got a little more detailed than you needed to be. Get rid of unnecessary details. What is it that's important to know? Don't be flowery, just go basic. Paraphrasing starts, as I said, the same way. Read your text. But now put it away. Don't look at it, just like when you're summarizing. You don't want it there because it's a temptation to look over at it, and then it'll be hard to think your own thoughts with their thoughts, their words, right in your face. State those ideas in your own words, your language. What would you say? How would you say it? Don't change the meaning of the text. Don't change the order. Paraphrasing is not taking 3 paragraphs and moving them around like a shell game, and suddenly now paragraph 3 is paragraph 1, and you feel as though you've paraphrased. No, no. It's got to be in the basic order it came in originally. Don't change what the person was trying to say. Don't change the order it came in. Check your paraphrase against the original. Again, for phrases, make sure that any exact phrases are in quotation marks. And if it still sounds like the text with only a slightly different word here or there, you need to do more work on it.
Okay. So we've been working on how to do it. Now she showed you examples of how not to do it. You don't want to sound like an echo of the original. I said this before. If you get too close to it, and it's not changing every other word, it's fully translating it. This is especially helpful if you have those difficult academic sources that have really dense jargon and language. Basically, if there's not a reason to quote it, you should probably be paraphrasing it. Now, I explain using quotations, and then people are like, okay, I'll just avoid using quotations. No, when I say quotes are more like a spice than a main ingredient, a paper without spice is pretty bland, right? So we need some of those good quotes to add interest to your paper, okay? So remember these tips. We're going to go ahead and take our break, and we'll come back at 8:45 and start talking about the next paper. All right, I'll see you in 5.